I accused my boyfriend of cheating, and now I deeply regret my actions. I never thought I would become the kind of person who searched through someone else's phone. For years, I had always said that if you couldn't trust your partner, the relationship was already over. Then one night, I did exactly what I used to judge other people for doing. Looking back now, I wish I had walked away from that phone. I wish I had asked one simple question instead of letting my imagination take over. Because one terrible assumption ended a relationship that had taken 3 years to build. My boyfriend, Ryan, and I had been together since college. He was the calm one. I was the overthinker. Whenever something went wrong, Ryan wanted facts. I filled in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Most of the time, our personalities balanced each other out. Sometimes, though, they created problems. Especially after Ryan started his new job. His schedule became unpredictable. Some nights he worked until 9. Other weeks he traveled without much notice. He was always exhausted when he came home. I told myself that was normal. Starting a new career was stressful. Still, little things slowly began bothering me. He smiled at his phone more often. He started putting it face down on the table. He occasionally stepped into another room to answer calls. None of those things proved anything. But together, they planted a seed of doubt. The worst part was that I never talked to him about it. Instead, I started collecting tiny moments that seemed suspicious. If he came home late, I assumed there was another woman. If he forgot to text during lunch, I convinced myself he was with someone else. Every innocent explanation sounded less believable than the story I had already created in my head. Then came the night that changed everything. Ryan had fallen asleep on the couch after working nearly 12 hours. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up. A message appeared from someone named Emily. The preview read, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow." My stomach dropped. My heart started pounding. Every fear I'd been carrying for months suddenly felt confirmed. I should have woken him up. I should have asked who Emily was. Instead, I unlocked his phone using the passcode I'd known for years. I knew I was crossing a line. I did it anyway. The conversation looked exactly like what I had feared. Heart emojis. Inside jokes. Photos. Plans to meet the following afternoon. The more I read, the angrier I became. By the time Ryan woke up, I wasn't looking for an explanation anymore. I was looking for a confession. The argument exploded almost immediately. I accused him of lying. Of cheating. Of wasting 3 years of my life. I barely let him speak. Every time he tried to explain, I interrupted him. I even threw my apartment key onto the table and told him to leave. He looked completely stunned. Not guilty. Just confused. Before walking out the door, he quietly said something that didn't register until much later. He told me I was making a terrible mistake. I thought it was just another excuse, so I slammed the door behind him. I blocked his number before he even reached the parking lot. At the time, I felt proud of myself. I believed I had stood up for my self-respect. I had no idea. I had just destroyed my own relationship over something I didn't understand. The next morning, I expected to wake up feeling angry. Instead, I felt strangely empty. Part of me wanted Ryan to keep calling, to keep texting, to fight for us. My phone stayed silent. At first, I took that as proof that he didn't care. Then I remembered I had blocked his number on everything. He couldn't contact me, even if he wanted to. Still, I refused to admit I might have acted too quickly. I spent the day replaying the messages I'd seen. Every heart emoji. Every joke. Every plan to meet. The evidence had looked undeniable. By that evening, several of my friends already knew what had happened. Most of them immediately took my side. They told me I'd done the right thing, that no loyal boyfriend texted another woman like that. Their reassurance made me feel better. For a while. 2 days later, I ran into Ryan's younger sister, Megan, at a coffee shop. She smiled when she saw me. Then she noticed the expression on my face. She asked if everything was okay. I hesitated before telling her we'd broken up. Her smile disappeared. She looked genuinely shocked. She asked what had happened. I explained everything. The late nights. The messages. Emily. The heart emoji. The plans to meet. I expected Megan to become angry at her brother. Instead, she looked completely confused. Then she quietly asked a question I wasn't expecting. "Did Ryan ever tell you Emily's last name?" I said no. She immediately pulled out her phone. After scrolling for a few seconds, she turned the screen toward me. The woman smiling in the photo wasn't some mysterious coworker. She looked familiar. Very familiar. It took me several seconds to realize why. Emily was Ryan's cousin. Not just any cousin. His first cousin. They had practically grown up together. The photos I'd seen in their conversation suddenly made perfect sense. Most of them had been family pictures. Some were from birthdays. Others were old childhood memories. The inside jokes weren't flirtatious. They were references to things that had happened when they were kids. Even the message I'd obsessed over. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," had an innocent explanation. Their grandmother had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The entire family had planned to meet at her house the following afternoon to discuss long-term care and spend time with her while she still recognized everyone. Ryan had been helping organize the visit. Emily had sent the message because she hadn't seen him in months. The heart emoji wasn't romantic. It was simply how she texted everyone in the family. I felt my stomach twist. Megan kept talking, but I barely heard another word. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd accused Ryan of, collapsed in less than a minute. I left the coffee shop in a daze. The first thing I did was unblock Ryan's number. Then I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, and again. No answer. For the first time since our argument, I realized the silence between us wasn't because he didn't care. It was because I had been the one who pushed him away. I sent him a message. Then another. By the end of the night, I'd written paragraphs apologizing. I admitted I had jumped to conclusions. I admitted I had invaded his privacy. Most importantly, I admitted that I had never given him the chance to explain. Hours passed. There was no reply. The next morning, I tried calling again. Still nothing. For the first time in our relationship, Ryan wasn't the one trying to fix things. A week later, I finally received a text. It wasn't angry. It wasn't insulting. It was only one sentence. "I'll meet you once. That's all I can promise." We agreed to meet at a small cafe where we'd had our first date 3 years earlier. I arrived almost half an hour early. Ryan walked in exactly on time. He looked exhausted. Not because of work. Because of everything that had happened between us. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then I apologized. Not just for accusing him of cheating. For every part of it. For searching through his phone. For refusing to listen. For treating him like he was guilty before he'd even had a chance to speak. I didn't make excuses. I didn't blame insecurity. I didn't blame social media or past relationships. The choices had been mine. Ryan listened quietly. When I finished, he nodded. Then he told me what that night had felt like from his perspective. He said he'd spent weeks working overtime because his grandmother's condition had suddenly worsened. He'd been helping his parents with medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and family meetings. He hadn't told me how overwhelmed he was because he didn't want to add more stress to my life. Instead of asking why he seemed distant, I decided I already knew the answer. He admitted something that hurt more than anything else. The cheating accusation wasn't what broke him. It was the fact that I had believed the worst about him so quickly. After 3 years together, one text message from someone I didn't recognize outweighed everything we'd built. He said that realization had been devastating. I couldn't argue with him, because he was right. If our positions had been reversed, I would have been crushed too. Before we left, I asked the question I'd been carrying for days. I asked whether there was any chance we could start over. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He stared into his coffee for a long time. Finally, he spoke. He said he still loved me. That had never been the problem. The problem was trust. He wasn't sure how to rebuild something that had disappeared in a single evening. "Love," he said, "can survive mistakes. But trust takes much longer to return once it's broken." We left the cafe together. He hugged me goodbye. It felt familiar, comforting, and heartbreaking at the same time. Because for the first time in 3 years, I honestly didn't know whether it would be our last hug. Over the next few months, we stayed in touch. Not as a couple. Just as two people trying to figure out whether there was anything left to save. Sometimes we'd exchange a few messages about work. Sometimes we'd meet for coffee. There was no flirting, no pretending everything was suddenly okay. We were simply honest. For the first time in a long time, every conversation felt real. Ryan eventually admitted that my accusation had changed the way he saw our relationship. Before that night, he had believed we were a team. Afterward, he realized that when pressure appeared, I hadn't stood beside him. I had stood against him. Hearing those words hurt because they were true. I couldn't undo what I'd done. All I could do was accept responsibility and show him, over time, that I was willing to become a better partner. I started seeing a therapist. Not because Ryan asked me to. Because I finally recognized a pattern in myself. Whenever something felt uncertain, I rushed to fill the silence with fear. Instead of asking questions, I invented answers. Instead of trusting people, I tried to protect myself by assuming the worst. That habit hadn't only affected my relationship with Ryan. It had affected friendships, family, and even my career. For the first time, I began working on it instead of pretending it wasn't there. Nearly 6 months after we broke up, Ryan called me. His grandmother had passed away peacefully. I attended the funeral, not because I thought it would bring us back together, but because she had welcomed me into their family for 3 years, and I wanted to pay my respects. After the service, Ryan introduced me to several relatives, including Emily. She hugged me before I could even apologize. She smiled gently and admitted Ryan had eventually told the family what had happened. Instead of being angry, she simply said she hoped both of us found peace. Her kindness somehow made me feel even more ashamed. She owed me nothing. Yet she showed me compassion anyway. As Ryan and I walked back toward the parking lot, neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he stopped walking. He admitted he'd been watching the changes I'd made over the past several months. He'd noticed that I no longer jumped to conclusions. That I listened more. That I apologized without expecting immediate forgiveness. He told me something I'd almost given up hoping to hear. He wasn't ready to forget what had happened. He probably never would. But for the first time, he believed we might actually have a future. Not because the past had disappeared, because we had both learned from it. We agreed to take things slowly. No moving back in together. No pretending we could erase 6 painful months overnight. We started dating each other again, the way we had in the beginning. One dinner, one walk, one honest conversation at a time. It wasn't easy. Trust never returns all at once. It grows quietly through consistent actions. Today, we've been back together for almost 2 years. We're engaged now, but the proposal looked very different from what I once imagined. Before Ryan got down on one knee, he smiled and said there was only one promise he wanted from both of us. If either of us ever felt scared, suspicious, or uncertain, we would ask each other before believing our own assumptions. I said yes, not just to the proposal, but to the lesson I learned the hardest way possible. Looking back, I still regret accusing him of cheating. I regret invading his privacy. I regret letting fear speak louder than trust. But that mistake forced me to confront parts of myself I had ignored for years. Sometimes people ask what almost ended our relationship. They expect me to mention another woman. There never was another woman. There was only a text message. An assumption. And my decision to believe my fears before I believed the man who had spent 3 years proving he deserved my trust. That's a mistake I'll never make again. Today, Ryan and I have been married for a little over 3 years. Sometimes people hear our story and assume it has a perfect ending. It doesn't. It has an honest one. Every now and then, one of us will remember that night. Not because we're still angry, but because neither of us wants to forget how fragile trust can be. One evening, not long after our wedding, Ryan left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went outside to bring in the mail. A message lit up the screen. For just a split second, I felt that old instinct. The same fear. The same temptation to look. Then I smiled, picked up the phone, and carried it to him without reading a single word. It seemed like such a small decision. But to me, it meant everything. Months later, Ryan told me he'd noticed. He admitted he had intentionally left the phone there. Not as a test. Simply because, for the first time since everything happened, he no longer worried about hiding it or protecting it. That moment meant more to him than I realized. It wasn't about the phone. It was about trust, finally feeling safe again. People often ask me if I regret accusing him of cheating. The answer will always be yes. I regret every accusation, every assumption, every word I refused to let him say. But I don't let that regret define the rest of my life. Instead, I let it remind me of something much more important. Love isn't destroyed by difficult conversations. It's destroyed when we stop having them. If I had asked one question instead of making one accusation, our relationship might never have fallen apart. Instead, I chose certainty over curiosity, and I almost lost the person I loved most because of it. Ryan once told me that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It gives the future a chance to be different. I think about that often. Because he didn't just forgive my worst mistake. He gave me the opportunity to become someone better than the person who made it. Looking back now, I don't remember the text message anymore. I don't remember the heart emoji. I don't even remember the argument as clearly as I used to. What I remember is the lesson it taught me. When fear speaks louder than trust, even innocent moments can look like betrayal. Sometimes the strongest relationships aren't the ones that never face doubt. They're the ones where both people choose to ask, to listen, and to believe each other before believing their own fears. And if sharing my story keeps even one person from making the same mistake I did, then the hardest chapter of my life won't have been meaningless after all.